All right.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the ECS Board of Trustees to order. We'll start with a roll call. So just go around. You can say your name. Adam Spice, Matthew Wood, Nick Conkovic,
Kristen Long. Joel Serrata.
Ellen Romagny.
Sarah Walker, David Turner, and Madeline Casita is here. And I think online we have
Shante.
Shante. Okay, so we have a quorum. So we will do the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The mission of ECS is to educate students to high academic standards using innovative curricula that will foster knowledge, love of, and respect for the environment and preserve it for future generations. We grow as citizens. Our vision: every ECS graduate will be an actively engaged citizen driving thoughtful change in the world around them. Latanya, do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay, so a couple things that I want to do here before we move into the business part of the meeting. The first is we have a couple of board members who will be completing their service at the end of this month that I want to recognize. Kristen Long is the first one. She's been a loyal and active board member for 3 years, and ECS parent. She's been extremely helpful, and I want to thank you, Kristen, for your service.
Thank you all.
And I also want to thank Megan Carter, who I think is coming, but I don't see her yet, who has also been a very active member of the board. She's been the chair of the Finance and Facilities Committee, and dedicated a lot of her time to this organization, which to me is doubly impressive because she does not have kids at the school. So I'm still amazed by all of you guys that are non-parents and still want to spend your time here. That's very commendable. One other very big recognition that I would like to make. I've had the good fortune of working in a lot of places with a lot of really, really talented individuals, but it's, I think, very rare that you come across a dedicated and talented leader like John McCann. He has continuously impressed me with the way that he interacts with every level of this organization, from the board to the administration to the staff, the parents, the kids. And I think that image of John dressing up as a giant pumpkin on Halloween, being out there, it's just really, he'll be a role model for me forever. And I just don't meet many people with such leadership qualities and just who are so impressive in your life. So, John, it was a special pleasure to see you get clapped out of the school the other day. For those of you that weren't there, the kids from the primary and intermediate school basically lined all of Braddock Avenue from between the two schools, and John high-fived them all going by. And that hopefully was a special experience for you. We do have it's not here physically, but we do have a token of appreciation from the board, which is that we adopted a tree and fruit card in your honor to preserve Pittsburgh. And I think possibly we also have a cake. Dina, is that okay? Yeah. Which whatever you feel is appropriate, you can give to them, or have let him share. He can decide if he wants to share it, I guess. So again, like a big round of applause. I won't make anyone else give a speech unless anyone wants to say anything. The floor is open for a minute. But here's the tape. So yeah, what else can I say about the shoes to fill? The next thing that I would like to do is recognize our CEO recruitment search committee, led by Nicole Schaefer. This group of folks really put in an amazing amount of work to start this process, to come up with the standards that we were looking for in a CEO. They took input from a lot of different stakeholders, and were just tremendously instrumental in this whole process. So I do want to just call them out by name, and then I'll let Nicole speak for a minute. But it was Nicole Schaefer, Lisa Elliott, Audrey Rogers, Frida Kinney, Joe Gleason, Kristen Abeshouse, Laura Micco, Michael Aronson, and Vicki Shea. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody. I think that was the main committee. Yeah. Nicole, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that the process is always more important than the product, although the product is really important. And this process not only was important for finding our next CEO, but it was also incredibly insightful in learning about our organization and where we are. One of the most powerful pieces of this process has been the amount of stakeholders and insights and learning that we have had as an organization, as a group, in areas and spaces that we, I think, did not expect. And so, you know, one of the pieces that I think we take away from that is we are more honored to provide this next space. I think my metaphor for this is John McCann brought this baby from the NICU and was bringing it all the way to the developmental milestone of the teenager. And now it's in the rebellious, angsty, a little grumpy stage of the teen years. If you don't have a teen yet, it's very much, the metaphor works very well for where the organization is at. And it is the perfect time for it to grow its legs and for that push and pull of independence to happen for the organization going forward. So that doesn't mean Mr. McCann will not have an incredible place in this heart of BCS, but also the organization will also have the place of him as part of his legacy. And I think the final piece that I hope, as you know, I work with Patrick or the board going forward, you know, our group did uncover a lot of the good things and a lot of the warts, things that we expected and things that we didn't expect. And so utilizing our insights as a team would be a helpful step as we're planning the tactics and strategy for this transition from teenagehood to adulthood. And so as a good parent, thank you again for letting go when you need to let go, and then also coming back and standing next to us when that time is right and when the organization is ready to say, look at me, look how proud you can be. So the last piece I will say on more logistics sense, less about the emotional part, but now you've got a succession plan. So again, Patrick, close your ears. But the idea here is we have been literally talking about this for a decade, about not having a process or a plan when someone might get hit by a bus or choose to leave. Or, you know, there's a crisis situation and we need to choose someone soon or quick. So this document will be in place for both a process as well as you know, suggested communications for both angles. So give me a minute, and I'll be documenting all of that. And then the final piece to this, which hasn't been a part of the process, but I think is important, is we're gonna do a full reflection on the process with all of the stakeholders that we've reached out to. And we just wanna know what they felt, if there were insights that they had, if there were things that we could do better, and if there are things that they learned along the way. And that's it. Adam, is that, I think I
Yeah,
got
that's
all
great.
of it.
Yeah, thank you.
So look for that reflection tool and look for, not a binder, but a lovely online digital tool stand so that you will have a succession plan for the books.
Okay, thank you again. So we'll move into some business. We have a resolution. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the blank with the name of Patrick Dowd. I'll read the resolution 2024-6-2124. Be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the appointment of Patrick Dowd as incoming Chief Executive Officer is hereby confirmed. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Okay, I don't think anyone's opposed, so the motion carries. Thank you for your pleasure.
Well, thanks. I'm a little nervous. First, thank you for the vote. That really means a lot to me. I think it's a sign of the beginning of a partnership, and I really look forward to getting started on that partnership. And to Nicole's point about process, at one point, it was an extensive process, and at one point, my wife asked me, "So are they going to ask you to swim the 3 rivers and a time trial?" And it was expensive, and I think actually what was impressive to me wasn't what you asked me to do. It's what you asked the entire ECS community wanted to do, it sounds like, to be participating and to be engaged in that process. And that for me was really exciting and eye-opening. I know the school in a variety of different ways, from a variety of different angles, but to feel that in that particular process was moving to me. So I thank the whole community for that process, and the committee, obviously, for their work on that. And then just the last thing to say is, I've been watching ECS from afar, John, Nicole, and everybody here. It's been really impressive to watch as a policymaker, as a parent, as an advocate, just as a community person, right? Just seeing the work that you guys do, and to see that vote and to be a part of this community really means a great deal to me. So I'm very excited to get to start this work with everybody. And to sort of figure out together where we're heading, and to make sure we have a good succession plan. Among many other things. But seriously, I really am excited about getting started. And I guess I have homework, so that's back to school for sure. Okay, one school. Thanks.
Okay, so we can move into the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone wants to pull out of there? Okay, seeing none, resolution 2024-6-2125. Be resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the consent agenda for June 17th, 2024 be approved. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is passed. Okay, we're going to move to support education. Andy, I went faster than I thought, so you have to find it.
7.5 minutes.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to let everyone know we did get our preliminary results from our PSSAs, not our keystones, so those are our high school scores, but just our PSSAs from 3 through 8. And as a celebration, every grade level went up, right? So we're in that upward trajectory, which is really exciting. In our 3rd through 5th grade, in both ELA and math, we're in that 80%, which is really what you want to see, right? For like typical MTSS tier instructions, 80% of your students should be scoring about benchmark, which is great. Obviously, we always want to use that, but there is really great. In 6th through 8th grade, the ELA is in the 60s, and then in math, they're a little bit lower than that, but it's where they were last year. Again, with COVID and all of the learning loss that we saw in a lot of our middle grades, it's taking a little bit longer for our middle grades to rebound than our little ones. And then in science, our fourth graders scored like 90% proficient in science. And it's like out of control in that fourth grade, really excited about it. The other thing is that we saw a lot of students score in the advanced percentiles in our fourth through fifth grade too. So I'll have more of that as we get the actual results, that full complete package. This is only about 90% complete. Anybody who took a makeup is not involved in these counts. So we'll get those probably later in June, now end of June, July, so I can have that for you for the August group working. But it's really an exciting time for us.
Sure, you want to
I
work?
know. We also
Yeah, you're losing your life here? Okay, then the next thing, actually, go ahead, I don't know if you know you're on the agenda here, but you wanted to speak, or do you want to be a connection? Come back.
I'm gonna put it up.
Okay, so come back here. Yeah, okay. Okay, so why don't we move into the budget?
We did have one district that sends their reporting work over to sharing decrease, so I think that has to make a modification.
So, you about that? Am I clear what you're about to say?
Was that?
The local sports association was there?
Welcome towards tuition rate one decrease.
Oh, great. I'll probably explain why. Never not, but that doesn't, it's more, it's high, the higher level than that.
And that's for the current year, but we included that obviously in the
Okay, and anyone from the finance committee, have anything else you want to add about the budget? Okay, so resolution 2024-6-2126, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the 2024-25 school budget be approved. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, the budget is passed. Okay, and then I think we can go into the AI contracts. So we have two, this is related to the high school construction project. So we have two contracts to approve. One is for Turner, which is the construction management contract, and the other one's for our architectural firm. So hopefully you all had a chance to review those documents. Is there any comment on those two items?
I just like, this is a compilation of a lot of hard work. These agreements really just codify a lot of the discussions that we've had over the past many months. Not really, I would say a year. So the agreements have gone through a natural negotiation process. There's been some push and pull, I'd say a lot of pushing on our end and pulling Turner along for the most part. So, echoed some of the comments earlier, just John's solid work, supporting our attorneys, and just the entire team getting this in this final form. So I think we got what we need out of this, just to move this process, this long-awaited process forward, but also giving us the flexibility if we ever need to stop this process, we have that. So we'll protect them back there. No one wants to leave these agreements thinking about the worst-case scenario, but that's why we're all here. So just, these are well-placed and well-researched as well as well-negotiated things. And at the end of the day, it's a standard agreement. AIA typically is very owner-friendly, so even the basic provisions skew in our favor as well.
And I'd add that, we're pretty confident with the firm that's been selected, and the architect has also been working with the school for a while, and their comfort level there, and Turner's a strong firm. I think we'll do well with them.
Just one question, because what fraction of the kind of the full project is under, like, kind of encompassed within these two agreements? Is it the full project, and then
This is the design services, and
Okay.
then also the soft costs. The hard cost piece is the big piece.
Yeah.
We won't know that for some time, but
Okay.
this is the team that will design and budget and give us regular estimated.
Yeah.
To hopefully give us an achievable, workable product, so we don't get surprised at bid time that we're 30% over like we did last time.
Yep.
So that's one of the key reasons why we went down this path, of having the owner's rep that could sit alongside the architect and estimate throughout the process, and it wasn't, like you said, that last minute surprise over there.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so we'll take these one at a time. Resolution 2024-6-2127, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the Turner CM AIA contract be approved. Motion, second, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, that passes. And resolution 2024-6-2128, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the Avon Design Architectural contract be approved.
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, those contracts are approved. And now we'll turn it over to Rohit for some more education.
Yeah, this is going to be a high level, and I'm hoping to go through this pretty fast. But one of the things that out of our conversation on the, as we're digging into kind of the funding stuff, I wanted to, everybody's talking about PPS and what's their funding hit and possibly not hit in the last month or so. And I just realized that we probably want to do a high overview for the board as to how funding works for charter schools. Michelle's going to tell me if I've done anything wrong in this, but it's meant to be a high level. If there's any questions that this brings up, please let us know. This is also meant to be fairly strategic, just to say like what could be coming down the pipeline in terms of funding. And this is meant to be just kind of like a high level, very high level. So, all right, so we'll just start here. If you take anything from this presentation, this is the formula that you should get. I'm a math person in general, so I promise I didn't put too much in here. But really what you get is the amount of the expenses that the school district has divided by the number of students in that school district, including charter school students, is the rate by which we get paid. And then our funding is just multiplied by the number of kids that come from that school district. It's fairly simple in principle, in theory, but it's really like how much do they spend on each student, how many students do they have, and then how many students do we get from that school district. The next slide will say that there are actually a lot of asterisks to this, a lot of different permutations of this. I see a lot of nodding over there, so I'm still getting it right.
Yeah.
So if you go to the next page, just to give you a sense of like what that means by school district, we primarily have most of our kids coming from PPS. Broken down by school, you'll see that the majority of our K through 5, we have a much higher percentage coming from, in our primary school, coming from PPS, and it goes down as we go through the upper grades, going from about close to 90% of the primary to about 70% in high school. The big difference there is that PPS roughly is twice as much, gives us twice as much tuition per capita, per pupil, versus the other districts. And so that's kind of the big takeaway. But again, it's about where do we get our kids from, and depends how much money we get. Next slide. So the main thing that I want to focus on is this part, the school district expenses over number of students in school district. This is really the rate by which we get paid. And the thing that I really want to point out here is actually, it's the top part, expenses. It's not necessarily revenue that the school district that impacts us. It's the expenses. And this is a big thing. So you've been hearing a lot about the deficit that's PPS is encountering. The deficit doesn't actually impact us in the fact that if they keep the expenses the same. It's really kind of like, that's kind of the perverse nature of it, is that it doesn't matter what the shortfall is if they keep the expenses the same. The question is, how do they bridge that deficit? Do they increase revenues or do they decrease the expenses? And that's what impacts us. So if you go to the next slide, how they determine their expenses, and this is where it goes a little bit further, is that this is the famous PDE 363. I got those numbers right? All right, I'm getting corroboration from both sides. Continuity right there. This is the magical formula and document that actually goes out to that the school district puts together. I believe every district in Pennsylvania puts out one of these. And this is the latest one from PPS, and it documents what the expenditures are for the school and also for special ed. I'm going to get to special ed in a bit. That top part, which I've highlighted over here, says that total expenditures for the school were $749 million for last year. But they're only accounting, they have a bunch of deductions that are accounted for, which are not included in the expenses when it's calculated as part of this ratio. This is also important because this comes into play with some scenarios that might come down. So the main thing is not every expense is an expense that gets included in the numerator of that equation. In fact, $286 million of that larger amount is actually taken out. So what you ultimately are left with is $463 million divided by about 24,000 students district-wide is where we get the $19,337 per student that we get for a regular education student. So the next slide will actually show what are those deductions, because that is actually a big part of this equation. And there's a lot of them. Broadly, I would say anything that comes from federal or state is deducted. Just a very broad thing. Transportation, that 32 million, 2,700 line is also deducted. So in theory, and the way I understand it, Michelle's going to tell me if I'm wrong, but if they were actually to cut transportation, it wouldn't impact our number. So if you hear anybody from PPS saying, "Oh, we're going to cut transportation," it doesn't matter to us. We don't have transportation from them anyway. But well, that's not true. But we also won't get hit that bad. There are other things here like special ed is taken out, but this is how it's broken out. Head Start is actually taken out of this as well. So because that would be part of the federal and state numbers as well. There's also the 5,000 block here, which is other finances and uses and also facilities acquisition, which is something that I have not been able to crack. I'm just still trying to figure that out. I've gone through the 4-line codes at the state level and actually reconstructed this for the last 5 years, and they don't line up. So that's just another thing that I plan on digging into, but this is all publicly available if you know where to look. So that's just something to know. The 286 million includes all of this. I would say the biggest things to note, state and federal is not included in this, and transportation is not included. That's the big takeaways. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that, well, another big part of this is special ed. And this is the most complicated formula you're going to see. And this is how special ed is actually calculated. You take that regular per pupil rate, that 19,000. So that's what that regular per pupil rate is. On this side, what you do is you actually take the school district's special ed expenses and divide it by the number of kids that are in the district, which is 24,000, multiplied by 16%. Why is it 16%? That's a great question. It's historically, I think, what they consider the average of the special ed population to be. The number actually is, this is where you start to realize that there's ways to game the system, or not game it, but it's unfair. In fact, a school district that actually has a higher number of special ed students, that is higher than 16%, would actually be paying more per special ed per pupil expenses than this formula would dictate. Because if it's 20%, for example, if that's what they're actually paying special ed research, this number would actually be higher on the denominator. So the fact that it's 16 and fixed at 16 means that we are actually probably getting more per special ed student than the school district is actually paying for special ed students, especially in the case of PPS, Woodland Hills, and other school districts where the special ed student population is higher than 16%. So we are already getting more there. The second thing is that this does not take into account tiering of special ed services. Every special ed student, regardless of what kind of program they're in, is considered exactly the same. So that's also another thing to keep in mind. I just want to, as we look at where we need funding, I want to also show where we're also essentially potentially getting more than the district is. You take all of that and multiply it by the number of special ed students in our district, that's what we get. This number is roughly $42,000 for ECS right now, just to give you a sense of what that is. Next slide. So yeah, there we go, 46,000, my bad. So that's, again, in the PDE 363, they've outlined the same thing. It's the same exact question, it's the exact formula that I put out there. I'm going to pause here if there are any questions, because I'm going to go quickly through the scenarios that come out of this. Also, I see a lot of shaking heads, which is good. It's good. Yeah.
Can we audit this?
Can you audit the spread of the presentation or the?
There's submission of P 360, 34, whatever.
I'm gonna, Michelle, I'm gonna let you take that one. Can you?
Is it that an audit, like, or do we just have to trust the key numbers and the numbers, and then it's subject to some other regulators to make sure it happens?
Well, they are, it comes from something that's audited, but we can go back and question the numbers, we can go back to PBS.
Just here, that it's part art and part science. What's especially because I saw there was a call out that it's budgeted expenses. So I do a bad job of budgeting, and I have unplanned capital expenditures that blow up my entire budget.
Yep.
That doesn't affect the formula. I have a problem on my side of the school to solve for those and funding, but it means I don't pay PCS anymore.
Yeah, so what I actually did was I backed into the last 5-year numbers of this using the 4-digit like codes from that they actually submitted to the state, I believe 3 months after this. What I found is that some of these numbers are actually ballooned higher than what is actually done on this, but it's been linear. So if you think about every year being like, this is 18,000, 19,000, 20,000, the reported year to the state is like 18 and a half, 19 and a half. So it's just kind of, we catch up every year, but at some point it could also go the other way. There's also a bunch of facilities expenses that are essentially added on, but they're also taken out of the numerator and denominator. So it doesn't actually affect our overall budget, but there is something happening at that end that where the numbers don't line up, but it doesn't seem to have been a problem so far. And from what I can tell, it's trued up the next year, but that could be different when there's an inflection point.
Did you figure out who looks at these at the state and approves them going back to the auditing process?
Not from an auditing perspective, but they're all on an FTP server under the Department of Education, but very convoluted. Yeah. So I don't know who is actually auditing.
So I have 2 questions. First, are you available to help my son on a factor polynomial?
Taylor rule. I'm ready to do it.
The 16% number, so I think I understood what you were saying to be that that's not terribly helpful for us to understand even our own population, because we could have kids who have needs that are well beyond that 16% number, but we have kids that are well below that in terms of the services that they receive. And so if we are providing services high and above 16%,
Exactly.
that really doesn't mean we're getting
Right.
Any benefit.
Right. This is inflow. Yeah. You're totally right. It's inflow. And the reason I bring up that 16% is because as we start to go to scenarios, these are the things that are being talked about at the state level as to what we might be able to anticipate changes coming down the pipe. Like where if you see egregious unfairness, that's probably a good sign that there's going to be some scrutiny around that. And so I'll get back to that. But like that point.
Do you know anything about how, maybe you were talking about this earlier and I just wasn't following it, but how does the school district go from one budget year to another in their expenditures? Because if they have, they need to include the expenditures of the charter schools in their budget, right?
This is an outstanding question that we've been trying to figure out how charter schools like impact this, because one of the things that is coming down the pipeline is that there might be a cap on cyber charters. And the question is whether that's actually going to impact their expenses, and do we actually get a hit by them capping cyber charters at 8,000 at the state? And so I've been, when this moves from a volunteer position to a paid one, I'll be digging in a little bit more, but that sounds like a great question for and maybe answer for Patrick. But they are factoring that. Right now, I would say, if you look at their budget, they're very clear that I think maybe 20% of their budget right now is going to charter schools. And it increased alone 25% year over year.
Okay, and so like next year, the expenditures, budgeted expenditures will be higher to account for those additional charter schools. Okay, got it.
Next slide, please. All right, so what's the problem? And this is the reason why everybody's talking about. There's two big things. PBS has a budget deficit, and the only way that they can increase their revenue is by increasing taxes. They're actually very clear about this. There was a budget workshop about a week ago that they talked about this. And if you go to the next slide, we'll see that this is how they're funded right now. That blue quarter chunk right there is essentially the only part that they actually have direct control over. To give you a sense of like what they're limited by. 25% of their budget is really what they can control at this point. And so, yeah. So the question then becomes, they still have a budget deficit. The question is, how are they going to actually fill that? Are they going to raise revenues? And that's kind of their limitation. They can only raise revenues by increasing that amount. Or are they going to reduce expenses? Because in some ways, there is a little bit of right sizing that needs to be done. Next slide, please. This is where it gets a little technical, but I'm just going to point you to the projected 2024. The operating, let's just take a look at the very last slide. That's actually probably the best way to look at it. Right now, we have the new projections came out. Apparently, PPS, since about 2 months ago, just said that because of vacancies and not filling vacancies, a little bit of not reduction of staff, but just mostly vacancies, they were able to reduce their projected budget by quite a bit. In fact, they're no longer have as much of a budget deficit as they did about 2 months ago. But what I do want to point you to is look at the total expenditures, because that is probably a good ballpark for why our rates have been increasing over time. Because you see the total expenditures went the actual 656, 678, 694, and then it goes up. It's linear. However, there is a little bit of right sizing that's already being done in PPS because they projected to be 716 million this year, and they're looking at now 694 million. So we're probably going to start seeing an inflection point. I'm looking for nods over here. Yeah, so there is probably going to be an inflection point coming up soon where the expenditures are going to start going down. The other thing to note is that they are no longer in violation of maintaining about 35 million, which is that yellow line. It should be around 30. What their board policy is, 34 million. That's what they need to maintain as part of their budget. They're going to be over that in 2024. They're going to be closer to that in 2025, and there's going to be a deficit of 7 million, which is not nearly as bad as the 70 million that I saw a little while ago, about 2 months ago. Next slide. What they're really worried about is people appealing property taxes coming up, and so this is their worst case scenario. Again, this was 70 million 2 months ago. This is now 16 million. So in 3 years, they're expecting a deficit of about 16 million that they have to make up. Next slide will show that as they increase millage rates, which is that tax rate, one slide please. There you go. They're projected to actually claw that back. So all this means is that they have a plan that is actually going to increase revenue to maintain their budgets, which is a much better place than they were about 2 months ago, where it looked like that wasn't going to be enough. But at the same time, what I'm kind of looking at is this 2024 total expenditures, and that they actually overshot it by about 20 million. And there's a little bit of right sizing that's starting to happen. School closures, things like that will all impact that number downwards, and we're probably going to be we're going to see our expenses, the expenses go down. So the next slide, I believe. So again, this is the formula. This is the one formula to take away out of all this. And the next slide, I think, I do this right. Okay. So I'm just going to go through just a couple of scenarios out of these as to what might happen if going forward. So if the city cut costs, based on this formula, you can see that we would get less per student. If we can't recruit from PPS, we get less per student because we'd be getting, going to cheaper districts. If the city continues to shed students, but we maintain our population, we actually get more money out of this because the denominator of students in the district goes down, but we've maintained our population. So in theory, we would actually make more as a school if that were to happen. If we lose kids to private schools and they exit the system entirely, we actually would make more until the expenses start coming down. And it's also kind of like, that's short term. If we have to start tiering our special ed students, that's a scenario where we probably get hit quite, actually, I'm not sure. That's actually a scenario that we're working through to figure out what the impact of that would be. If the state starts capping cyber tuition at 8,000, we have an open question to our external partners on this, but it probably would reduce expenses. And then the seventh one, which we can talk about, and I think this is just interesting. We go to the next slide, please. Oh, that's the projection of students over the next 10 years. The next one. The hold harmless provision essentially says that we can't actually make less. Our budget cannot be lower than what it was in 2015 as a school district. It's a statewide. And the reason for that is they didn't want school districts to go into a death spiral by losing population, losing money, losing population, losing money. What it does mean is that Eastern Pennsylvania is subsidizing Western Pennsylvania. So at the state level, you can imagine this is something that's being looked at. It probably won't be eliminated, but PPS is getting $80 million out of this. 10% of their budget is due to this. Yeah. And so every place in red, and so you can imagine Philly is not too happy about this. The rest of Pennsylvania is loving it. So it entirely has to do with the budgets are capped at a certain level. So this is also something that's being talked about at the state level, along with the special ed tiering. So all I want to do is like, where are the advantages, where are the disadvantages? Because if we look down the pipeline at the scenarios, that's probably the best place to look at in terms of a policy perspective, what might be changing, in addition to our demographics. And that's it. So.
Thank you, guys. That was excellent.
Exam later?
Yeah, that started.
Now I was passing out the multiple choice.
The exam would be later.
Okay, all right, excellent. So we get some committee reports. So the executive committee met last week. See if there's anything we haven't already covered here. So I think we've covered it all. There's nothing new to report from the executive committee besides what we've already done today. Governance, Stan, do you want to give any updates?
All I'll say is what I, the people what I said before, we've been in a little bit of a lull in terms of bringing the new members to the board on, which is perfectly fine. Good time since we've had a lot of other things going on. But we would start getting answers everybody to suggestions. A few people have made suggestions, potential members. We have at least sort of one person, I believe, who may be reaching out to some of you, governance committee, and any others who are interested in being a board member. So we kind of continue to keep restocking at the cupboard, especially since we're unfortunately losing a couple of our longstanding members to this meeting. So keep quality people on board, keep it going. Other than that, no.
Okay. Education committee.
Yeah, the primary thing we talked about were those amazing test results that Mandy shared in our last meeting. So I don't have anything to add other than to commend our administration, faculty, everyone involved in ECS because, we'll get the full report, but what we're seeing so far is absolutely incredible. And so everyone should feel really proud of that.
Okay.
Dr. Am I wrong to think that science is usually the lowest of the three scores?
And we typically have really high science scores in fourth grade, but overall.
Overall, in the state,
Yes.
yeah, okay. So I mean, it's an amazing accomplishment here. Higher science scores than that in English.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and the amount of our fourth graders that were actually advanced.
Yeah.
So right now, that is like 65 students, so 72% of that 90 were advanced.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Kristen. Finance and facilities. Still have Megan, so.
I can do this. I mean, there's not much reports other than, some of the schools need a little bit of work. That's what we'll talk about. There was, we talked a lot about like a different financing option for potentially buying the middle school, right? The middle school. And there was a recommendation to get an appraisal for it. There was also a property condition analysis, which essentially all of the this is my layperson explanation, but all the things that are wrong, like could be fixed from a long-term perspective. Just to get a book value of what is the shape of these buildings are. We got that recently. It's better than expected. But I think it's the assessment.
It's a good planning tool for.
Yeah, and it's a good planning.
Organize it.
Yeah, exactly, especially if you think about any price that we would want to offer for any of the buildings, it does go into that calculation. I think that's probably the high level. Is there anything about the facilities?
what is the status of that appraisal plan then?
So, so the middle school, our lease expires in March of 2026, so less than 2 years from now, we need to give notice, we have options to renew, we need to give notice by, March of 25. So a little less than a year from now. So, the current owner, which is again, the school we're sitting in, has expressed a desire to sell the building. We would obviously be the logical buyer for this. And so as part of starting those discussions, we're having discussions with a number of different groups that would help us finance the acquisition if we did want to do that. And then also we're having an appraisal commission to arrive at a general value. So kind of using all of those different inputs to figure out what is the capacity of BCS to actually buy this, and does it make sense to based on where we've actually continue the lease.
And just for those of us that don't work in real estate finance, how does the appraisal work? Like who does it? Do we have to pay a for that? And
Yeah.
how much does that cost?
So an appraisal is just a third-party opinion of value, and an appraiser uses kind of a hypothetical, theoretical approach to arrive at a value of a building based on the lease that's in place, based on market conditions. So we have asked FNB, who is a lender that we've worked with in the past, to give us a few quotes for appraisal reports. And the reason we're doing it through FNB is so that if we end up using them to finance the acquisition, they will be able to rely on that report as well as us to kind of figure out the value of the property should be.
Okay. And we would pay them.
And we would pay, it's typically a couple $1,000. Yeah. But we would have we would have a process, probably 3 appraisers would quote this before we actually do somebody to do the report. And we would pay for it, probably $3,000 to $5,000.
And is the finance committee thinking about the other buildings right now as well? Or?
So, so the high school is on a short-term lease right now. The middle school we talked about, the intermediate school we own, and is on a loan with I think 6 or 7 more years of term, and the rate is fixed for that period of time. So there's really nothing to do there. And then the primary school is on a longer term lease for another 8 or 9 years. So we could consider something there, but there's not that near term inflection point. So I think looking at the middle school first, just in terms of our lease expiration coming up, makes the most sense. And if we find a way to acquire this or kind of restructure the lease that makes sense, then we could try to execute something similar at the primary school. But there's no immediate need to do that at the primary school. Or reason for the landlord to.
As you said, the other scenario here is the middle school is we're dealing with a landlord who does want to transact.
Right.
The primary school, they're fine to back up.
Yeah.
They've not indicated below this south.
Are there questions for the finance facilities committee? Okay, great. BCSFT. Yeah. Okay.
I think we should just say thank you to the teachers for a great school year. I know it's probably because they're out right now with our ECSF team. Most teachers are doing the day. But it was a wonderful year, so I think we should commend all of our educators and support staff for getting us to this point. Yeah.
Okay, PCO, report. Okay. Okay, so I don't hear PCO report.
Mr. President,
No, you're out of order.
Oh, no. Yeah, but we do have this transition committee going, you might know about.
Oh, yeah.
You guys for Megan, you might say something about that?
Yeah, that's great. And I think, Nicole, you and I should talk about, a little bit about this too, to make sure that we're kind of got all of our eggs in, not the same basket, but we're coordinating. Yes, exactly. What we've done for the last couple of weeks, we've put together a little bit of a draft timeline of activities to take us from where we are today to around October 15th or thereabouts, when John will make his official retirement, including when we're onboarding Patrick, and all the different types of activities around administrative onboarding, kind of education, and and making sure that all of the knowledge transfer is happening, according to how we'd like to do it. Also, another category of things that we're planning out is how to do kind of stakeholder and community introductions and warm handovers of those relationships. And then finally, a little bit about how, once we start talking a little bit more to Patrick, what are the kind of strategic initiatives that he's interested in? What is the input he's getting from the larger community on those potential strategic initiatives, and helping him set that up for as he's entering a school year. Anyway, so those are the kind of the categories of things we're thinking about. We put together a little bit of a timeline. We're working on it, and I think we haven't planned on when we do this, but now that we've had this meeting, we can start sharing it out so people can provide their input on that, and then also we can start working with you, Patrick, on what you think of the timeline, how you'd like to move things around. Great. Yep. So we have a meeting a couple times a week, and I'll get a note out just so people can see what it looks like right now, and then we'll go from there.
And just one last thing, part of it also was communication around the transition,
Yes.
which a lot of it's already been put in place by Dina, who's been working really hard. So she's connected with Patrick, she's connected with me, she's connected with Stan. So just want to acknowledge that hard work you're going to see tonight if you start looking online.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Megan. Okay, so the governance committee has proposed an officer slate for the 2024-25 school year, which I will read. President Stan O'Loughlin. Vice President Megan Leach, Secretary Matthew Radulik, Treasurer Rohit Acharya. I will be Vice President by default. Governance Chair Dave Turner. Education will be Brandon Forbes and John Sereda, and Rohit will be the Chair of the Finance and Facilities Committee. So we have a resolution 2024-6-2129. Be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the 2024-25 board officer slate be approved. So moved. Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, congratulations. Okay, great. So I believe that will take effect with the new school year. Is that what we've kind of decided?
Yeah, the next meeting.
Next meeting? Okay.
Controversial.
I get to finish this one out. Yeah. And then I also want to announce that I have used the last shred of my executive authority remaining to appoint David Turner to be the board's liaison to the ECS Foundation. Nicole was strongly against it, but I'm. Good, so congratulations, Dave. We're going to move on so you don't speak. Okay, other business. We have a couple of policies to discuss.
which we've never had, and since we're in a high school, we need to have it. And this is basically what the state requires in the withdrawal from school. If you read through it, you can see it's aimed on farm kids and other people like that. But the idea is that if some student wants to withdraw, there has to be a process. If we really didn't have a policy to fall back on, we don't have to deal with that yet. But this is the policy, and the parent has to sign that to meet with the CEO, that kind of thing. With that, as Marissa McGuire said, I think as we know, this is something that we should have had in place, we're just lucky we didn't up till now. The other one is our conflict of interest policy. This is the one that was passed in 2016 when UGG required a large number of policies to be in place by every board. But in 2020, I believe, the state required that sentence that is highlighted be in every conflict of interest policy. We realized that when we were just monitored for our federal programs. As part of that, they looked at the UGG policies that are required to be placed because it is a federal program, and we didn't have that sentence in place. So we needed to amend the current policy to have that sentence. That's what the two policies are.
What's the UGG?
Uniform grants guidance. I'm sorry. I'm used to throwing all those out. But there are, what are the different ones? Cash, there's a travel policy, there's, and it has to do with, they want to make sure that you have policies in place that would affect any of the federal grants that come through, is basically it. And that's why when they monitor federal programs, which they did back in May, April, May, you had the idea of uploading all those policies that have been passed. And not being aware that this had been added back in 2020, that was highlighted. So I put a thing in saying it'll be with the board in June and hopefully passed in August, and then I can upload it.
And so we're saying upload, so that when we're involved in the federal grant-making process, they actually ask us to send.
In this case, when we're monitored for federal programs, which is every 4 years, yes, you have to upload them. There's a whole, if you ever want to sit down sometime, I'll go through the whole process of all the things that have to be uploaded for them. When we apply every year for our federal programs, which Title I, Title II-A, and Title IV, there's not much uploading there. That's just, we have to do a memorandum of understanding with AIU on transition from preschool, and that's basically it. We just have to fill out the application. But the monitoring, they want to see that you have everything that you need to have.
And so this language, this came through, you said something like that. Template, this came through our attorneys or?
It came from the state in our monitoring.
Okay.
And he said, in there it says every, it's hard to explain, but it's, Fed monitoring is a place online that you have to go in and upload all the documents, then they will look at them and tell you. There's a sidebar that says, like, conflict of interest, all policies that, have to have any past prior to 2020, need to be updated and include the following language. So it was given to us, that's what we want to see.
Yeah, we can document that, because it was a little confusing to me, just, and I won't get into it here, and I had looked at this policy previously to the conflict of interest question that came up, but like, it doesn't, it's weird because it doesn't actually cite to a federal, it cites the federal regulation, which actually, but also it doesn't cite to a state rule or regulation, and I couldn't. So anyway, we can talk, maybe it's worth the discussion, because I just want to make sure that I understand what's going on here. Because I think conflict of interest policies sort of move those, for me anyway, is one of those cornerstone policies. It's probably a little different from the others that they could have drawn from school policies. Important if you need it, but conflict of interest is governs a lot about what we do. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page on that.
Just one question along those lines. I mean, if we were to vote on this right now, my understanding is this is our existing policy with that language added. So it wouldn't be, this is just one of those situations right now where we're not making any substantive changes. We're just saying, this is what we got, but we're complying with. Right?
Yeah, okay.
Or under our policy adoption process, right, it would be an amendment, right, to existing. So consistent with that, Stan, I believe will be on Thursday of this week to go through the upcoming policies to be reviewed over the course of next year.
Right.
But with that being said, our next move here under our adoption policies to turn these to the public, out to be publicly facing.
Right.
We'll do that on.
Okay.
Yeah, Stan, all that has, this is the site that I have uploaded these things, we were saying before. And all it had was board approved policy, please note if LA is using the PSBA template for 2016-17, must update new policies with language under reporting conference, and then it's that sentence.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I think it's where it comes from. Okay.
So regarding these two policies, if I'm remembering our process correctly, we've now had this discussion. They will be posted as a draft on our website. And then at the next board meeting, we can either vote to approve or vote not to approve. Is that correct?
Yeah, or I guess, yeah, or something like that. But to.
So this will give our public, in this case, a couple months to review it and comment if they so choose. Okay. Any other questions about these two policies or about the process? Okay.
Sorry, Adam, real quick.
Yeah.
The conflict of interest ones, it's already public facing because it's a current policy. So
Okay.
with the way we have the process written, and it's already a current policy, we work it like this one here for the agenda to update it for you all, and then the current one was posted to the public website also. Without the red line wording, where the public was already posted.
Okay, before we go to executive session, is there any other new business? Okay, just a reminder, we, unless some emergency comes up, we will not have a meeting in July. So our next scheduled board meeting will be August 21st. And I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, we'll take a couple minute break and then go to executive session.
I finally sent you.
I did, I
You see it?
saw
Okay,
that,
good.
yes, thank you.
Yes, okay, good.